I never thought my own son would physically push me at the Christmas dinner table. The moment Nathan's hands connected with my shoulders, my 68-year-old body couldn't withstand the force. I crashed to the floor in front of my entire family, also his father-in-law could take my place. What my son didn't realize was that on that very night, I would change his life forever. The golden light strung across Nathan's living room mocked the darkness spreading through my heart as I lay sprawled on the cold tile floor. My grandchildren screamed my name, their voices piercing through the sudden deafening silence. 15-year-old Tyler and 12-year-old Emma rushed toward me, their faces twisted with confusion and fear. Rebecca, my daughter-in-law, brought her hands to her mouth in shock. But what chilled me most was the look in William Bennett's eyes as he stood watching pure satisfaction. "This seat belongs to my father-in-law. Get out!" Nathan said the words slicing through me more painfully than the fall itself. I'd spent my entire adult life building Jackson Development from nothing into a real estate empire worth millions. After losing my beloved husband Robert 5 years ago, Nathan became everything to me, my only son, my confidant, the future of our family legacy. Or so I believed until this moment. The $300 bottle of wine I'd brought for the occasion now seemed like a bitter joke, as did the carefully wrapped presents for my grandchildren piled under the tree. "Are you okay, Grandma?" Emma whispered, helping me to my feet, her eyes swimming with tears. "I'm fine, sweetheart." I lied my voice steady despite the trembling in my limbs. The physical pain was nothing compared to the wound torn open in my heart. In that moment, as I straightened my dress and attempted to salvage what remained of my dignity, something inside me broke. Not just my pride, something far deeper. The unconditional love I'd always felt for my son shattered like fine crystal dashed against stone. I took my seat at the side of the table, relegated to the position of a second-class guest in what had once been my own family circle. Throughout dinner, I watched Nathan interact with William Bennett, a 72-year-old businessman who had been my silent competitor for decades. My son spoke to this man with a reverence he had never shown me, hanging on every word, laughing too loudly at mediocre jokes, cutting the lamb with exaggerated care to ensure William got the choicest pieces. "Tyler got straight A's this semester," I commented, trying to reclaim some normalcy amidst the emotional chaos boiling inside me. "Oh, right," Nathan replied without even looking my way, completely focused on serving William. "Is the lamb cooked to your liking, Mr. Bennett?" I might as well have been invisible. For 42 years I had raised this man. I had taught him values principles, given him everything I had, and more. Now he was treating me like an annoying stranger at his own table. The children tried valiantly to fill the uncomfortable silence with innocent comments about school and friends, but even they sensed the seismic shift that had occurred in our family. Every laugh shared between Nathan and William pierced my soul like a dagger. Every deferential nod from Rebecca toward her father twisted the knife deeper. "I'm just going to the restroom for a moment," I announced quietly after the main course, not surprised when no one acknowledged my departure. They didn't even look up from their glasses of brandy and their business conversations from which I, the woman who had built the family company from nothing, was conspicuously excluded. I walked to the bathroom with measured steps, but my mind was racing at lightning speed. Once inside, I locked the door and stared at my reflection. The woman looking back at me didn't have reddened eyes from tears. Instead, her eyes reflected a cold anger crystallizing into pure determination. This was not a moment for breakdown, but for decisions. I pulled out my cell phone and began dialing numbers I knew by heart. First, Charles Whitman, my CFO. "Charles, I need you to implement Emergency Protocol B immediately." "Yes, every account. No warnings, no exceptions. I understand the consequences. Do it now." Next, Eleanor Richards at First National Bank. "Eleanor, I'm activating the contingency plan we discussed. Yes, tonight. All access privileges revoked by morning. Thank you for understanding the urgency." Then Marcus Henderson, my attorney. "Marcus, I'm initiating the Phoenix Clause in Nathan's employment contract." "Yes, I'm absolutely certain. Have the papers ready by 8 a.m. Finally, a call I never thought I'd make to William Bennett himself, set to ring at precisely 7 huzzers the next morning. "This is a pre-recorded message for tomorrow. William, we should talk. I believe I can offer you something far more valuable than whatever my son promised. My office, 10 a.m. Each call was brief, precise, and would set in motion a series of events that would dismantle everything Nathan thought secure in his life. My fingers didn't tremble. My voice didn't crack. When faced with absolute betrayal, emotion gives way to clarity of purpose. I splashed cold water on my face, reapplied my lipstick, and returned to the dining room with a placid smile that revealed nothing of the storm I had just unleashed. The remainder of dinner passed in a blur of meaningless conversation and pointed exclusion. I played my part, the dutiful mother, the polite guest, while inside I was already watching the pieces move across the board. When it came time for dessert, Rebecca brought out a magnificent Christmas cake, setting it proudly before her father. "Would you do the honors of cutting it, Dad?" she asked, handing him the knife that had traditionally been mine to wield at family gatherings. "It would be my pleasure," William responded, his eyes flicking briefly to me with a hint of challenge. I merely nodded my smile, never wavering. Let them have their moment. By this time tomorrow, they would understand the true meaning of consequences. As the evening wound down, I embraced my grandchildren with genuine warmth. They were innocent in this betrayal, and my love for them remained untouched by the night's events. "I'll see you both soon," I promised, knowing that within days their understanding of family dynamics would be forever altered. I declined Nathan's perfunctory offer to call me a taxi. "I've already arranged my ride," I informed him, my tone pleasant but distant. He didn't even walk me to the door. The December air bit into my skin as I waited on the porch for my driver, but I welcomed the cold. It matched the icy resolve that had replaced the warm maternal love I'd carried for decades. I gazed back at the house, my son's house bought with money from my company, filled with furniture I had helped select. Tomorrow, the foundations of his comfortable life would begin to crumble. My driver arrived, a young man who helped me into the car with the respect my own son had failed to show. "Rough night, Mrs. Jackson?" he asked, noting my unusual silence. "Just the beginning of a necessary change, David," I replied, watching the Christmas lights of Nathan's home recede in the distance. By the time I reached my penthouse, it was nearly midnight. Instead of retiring to bed, I went straight to my home office, a space Robert and I had designed together years ago, with wall-to-wall bookshelves and a view of the city that reminded me daily of what we had built. I powered up my computer and began executing the second phase of what I was already thinking of as Operation Awakening. First, an email to all board members of Jackson Development explaining my decision to remove Nathan from his position as Executive Vice President, effective immediately. Next, instructions to HR to revoke his access credentials to all company properties and systems. Then a message to our banking partners, freezing the generous trust fund that had cushioned my son's life since his 21st birthday. Each keystroke felt like both a betrayal and a liberation. The mother in me mourned the relationship that would never be the same. The businesswoman in me recognized that I was simply doing what should have been done years ago, forcing Nathan to stand on his own feet rather than on my shoulders. As dawn broke over the city skyline, I finally allowed myself a moment of grief. Not for what I was about to do, but for what had already been lost, the illusion that my son respected me, valued me, saw me as more than just the source of his privilege. I permitted myself exactly 5 minutes of tears before wiping them away decisively. My phone began ringing at 6:30 a.m. The first call was from the security desk at Jackson Development, confirming that Nathan's access cards had been deactivated. The second was from Charles, informing me that all financial transitions had been completed. By 6:45, calls were coming in from board members, most expressing support, a few voicing concern over the suddenness of my actions. At precisely 7:00 a.m., my pre-recorded message would be reaching William Bennett. By 7:15, I expected Nathan to begin receiving notifications. By 8:00, his world would be in freefall. I showered, dressed in my most imposing business attire, a custom-tailored charcoal suit with subtle red accents, and prepared to meet the day I had engineered. The woman who looked back at me from the mirror was not the humiliated mother from last night's dinner. She was Evelyn Jackson, CEO of Jackson Development, a woman who had navigated the cutthroat male-dominated real estate market for over 4 decades. "They forgot who you are," I told my reflection. Today, they remember. At 8:17 a.m., my personal phone lit up with Nathan's name and photo. I watched it ring until it stopped, then immediately begin again, and again, and again. By the time I left my penthouse at 9:30, he had called 47 times. I stepped into my waiting car, nodding to David. "The office, Mrs. Jackson?" "Yes. And David, I believe it's going to be an interesting day." When I arrived at Jackson Development headquarters, the atmosphere was charged with a nervous energy. Word had spread quickly the CEO had removed her own son from the company overnight. The receptionist greeted me with wide eyes, quickly picking up the phone to alert my assistant I had arrived. "Ms. Jackson, Mr. Bennett called to confirm your 10 o'clock meeting," my assistant informed me as I swept past her desk. "Excellent. Please show him in as soon as he arrives. And Miranda, no interruptions otherwise." I settled behind my desk, arranging the documents Marcus had delivered earlier. The proposal I was about to make to William Bennett would either secure a powerful ally or create an even more dangerous enemy. Either way, the die was cast. At precisely 10 hours, William Bennett was shown into my office. The look of surprised respect in his eyes told me he hadn't expected me to move so decisively or so ruthlessly. "Evelyn," he greeted me, extending his hand. "I must say you've created quite a stir this morning." I shook his hand firmly. "Please sit down, William. I believe we have much to discuss." For the next hour, I laid out a proposal for a joint venture between Jackson Development and Bennett Industries that would be far more profitable than whatever scheme he and Nathan had been planning. As I spoke, I could see the calculations running behind his eyes, weighing loyalty to his daughter's husband against the substantial profits I was offering. "This is quite generous," he admitted finally. "But what about Nathan? He's your son, after all." I met his gaze unflinchingly. "Nathan made his choice last night. Now he faces the consequences of that choice. The question is, William, what choice will you make today?" By noon, William Bennett had signed the preliminary agreement for our new partnership. By 2:00 p.m., news of the deal had reached every major player in our industry. By 4:00, Nathan had appeared at the security desk of Jackson Development, only to be denied entry to the building that bore his family name. The security footage showed him shouting, gesturing wildly, eventually being escorted back to his car by 2 guards. I watched the scene play out on my computer screen, feeling a strange detachment. The man throwing a tantrum in the lobby didn't resemble the son I had raised. Perhaps he never had been that person at all. That evening, as I prepared to leave the office, Miranda informed me that Rebecca had called, her voice trembling with anger and fear. "She wanted to know how you could do this to your own son," Miranda relayed uncomfortably. "She said Nathan's bank accounts are frozen, his company credit cards declined, and he can't even access his email." "Did she mention how Nathan could push his own mother to the floor in front of his children?" I asked quietly. Miranda looked away, her silence answer enough. I gathered my things, suddenly feeling every one of my 68 years. The adrenaline that had carried me through the day was ebbing, leaving in its wake a profound weariness. Not physical exhaustion, but a bone-deep tiredness of spirit. "I'll be working from home tomorrow," I informed Miranda. "Forward any calls from Tyler or Emma directly to my personal line. All other calls can wait." As my car pulled away from the building, I gazed up at the gleaming tower of glass and steel that represented my life's work. I had built this company from nothing, weathered recessions and market crashes, outsmarted competitors who underestimated me because of my gender. Through it all, I had believed I was creating a legacy for my son. Now I understood that a legacy isn't something handed down like a family heirloom. It must be earned, appreciated, respected. Nathan had done none of those things. Perhaps now, stripped of his privileges, he would finally learn the value of what he had taken for granted. My phone buzzed with a text from Tyler. "Grandma, what's happening? Dad's really upset." I responded carefully. "Some adult decisions had to be made, sweetheart. Your dad and I will work things out. Don't worry." A moment later, "He said really bad things about you." My heart constricted. "I'm sorry you had to hear that. Remember, I love you and Emma very much." "We love you too. Can we still come over Saturday?" "Absolutely. I'll make chocolate chip pancakes." That simple exchange, the unconditional love of my grandchildren amidst the wreckage of adult relationships, brought the first genuine smile to my face since the previous night's disaster. When I arrived home, I bypassed the empty formal dining room where Robert and I had once hosted family gatherings and went straight to my study. There, surrounded by photographs chronicling decades of family history, I poured myself a glass of the scotch Robert had loved and raised it in a silent toast to his memory. "You always said Nathan needed to learn some hard lessons," I whispered to the empty room. "I just never thought I'd have to be the one to teach them this way." The next morning, reports from my financial team confirmed what I had set in motion. Nathan's trust fund was inaccessible. His executive compensation package had been terminated according to the morality clause in his contract. His company car had been remotely disabled in his driveway. The morning news carried a small item about the surprising new partnership between Jackson Development and Bennett Industries, with analysts speculating about what this meant for the competitive landscape of commercial real estate in the region. By mid-afternoon, my house phone began ringing with calls from mutual friends and acquaintances, their voices carefully neutral as they inquired about the situation with Nathan. I gave the same response to each: family matters are being addressed appropriately. 3 days after Christmas, as the initial shockwaves began to settle, I received an unexpected visitor. William Bennett himself arrived at my door looking somewhat uncomfortable. "Evelyn, may I come in? There are some things we should discuss." I showed him to the living room, maintaining the polite formality of business associates, rather than the forced familiarity of almost family. "Rebecca is devastated," he began without preamble. "She's talking about taking the children and moving in with us temporarily." "I see." I kept my face carefully neutral. "And what brings you here to tell me this, William?" He shifted in his seat. "Nathan came to me yesterday asking for a job, said he'd do anything, start at the bottom if necessary." This was unexpected. I had anticipated Nathan would approach his father-in-law for help, but I had expected demands, not humility. "What did you tell him?" I asked. "I told him I'd think about it." William's eyes met mine directly. "But I wanted to speak with you first. Our partnership is too valuable to jeopardize." In that moment, I recognized that William Bennett was not the enemy I had imagined. He was simply a businessman making the best decisions for his interests, exactly as I was doing. "Nathan needs to experience consequences," I said finally. "But I have no objection to you offering him entry-level work. Nothing in management, nothing that leverages our partnership. If he genuinely wants to work his way up from the bottom, that's his choice to make." William nodded slowly. "That seems fair. And Evelyn, for what it's worth, I never expected or wanted him to treat you that way at dinner. It was uncomfortable for everyone." After William left, I sat alone in my living room, contemplating this new development. Nathan, willing to start at the bottom, the entitled man who had pushed me to the floor, would never have considered such humility. Perhaps the shock of losing everything had begun the process of transformation I had hoped for. That evening, my doorman called up to announce another visitor, Emma. My 12-year-old granddaughter stood in my foyer, her backpack clutched tightly against her chest. "Mom dropped me off," she explained, her voice small but determined. "I told her I needed to see you." I embraced her gently. "I'm always happy to see you, sweetheart." We settled in the kitchen, where I prepared hot chocolate while Emma watched with solemn eyes. When I placed the steaming mug before her, she wrapped her hands around it but didn't drink. "Dad says you took everything away because you're angry about Christmas dinner." The simplicity of her statement belied the complexity of the situation. I chose my words carefully, respecting her intelligence while acknowledging her youth. "What happened at Christmas dinner was a symptom of a much bigger problem, Emma. Your father has been making choices for a long time that aren't good for him or for the company. Sometimes when people have everything handed to them, they never learn to appreciate it or to stand on their own." "Like when you make me earn my allowance instead of just giving me money?" she asked, surprising me with her insight. "Something like that, yes. Only with much bigger stakes." Emma nodded thoughtfully, taking a small sip of her chocolate. "Dad broke your heart, didn't he? I saw your face when you were on the floor." Children see more than we give them credit for. In that moment, Emma's perception cut through all the business justifications and strategic decisions to the raw truth at the center. "Yes," I admitted quietly. "He did." "Will you ever forgive him?" The question hung between us, simple yet impossibly complex. I reached across the table to take her small hand in mine. "Forgiveness isn't something that happens all at once, Emma. It's a process that takes time. Right now, your father needs to learn some important lessons, and I need time to heal." Emma seemed to accept this, finishing her chocolate in thoughtful silence. Before she left, she hugged me tightly. "I told Dad what he did was wrong," she whispered against my shoulder. He got really quiet after that. 1 week after the fateful Christmas dinner, I was reviewing quarterly projections in my home office when my security system announced a visitor. The video monitor showed Nathan standing at my front door alone and without the confidence that normally characterized his posture. His shoulders were slumped, his expensive coat replaced by a more modest jacket I didn't recognize. For a long moment I contemplated not answering. The wound was still too fresh, the memory of hitting that floor still too vivid. But avoiding confrontation had never been my way. I buzzed him up, standing in the doorway of my penthouse as the elevator delivered him to my floor. When the doors opened, the man who stepped out barely resembled the arrogant figure from Christmas night. Nathan's face was haggard with dark circles under his eyes, suggesting sleepless nights. His hair, usually impeccably styled, looked unwashed, but it was the expression in his eyes that gave me pause, a mixture of shame, fear, and something I hadn't seen there in many years, humility. "Mom," he began, his voice hoarse, "I know I have no right to be here." I didn't invite him in immediately, maintaining the physical boundary between us. "Why are you here, Nathan?" He faltered, seeming to struggle with words that didn't come easily to him. "I came to say that I understand what you've done, and why you did it." This was not the angry tirade I had expected, not the entitled demands for reinstatement. I studied his face, looking for signs of manipulation or insincerity, finding none. "Come in," I said finally, stepping aside to allow him entry, but leading him only as far as the formal living room, not the more intimate family spaces of my home. Nathan perched on the edge of the sofa, hands clasped between his knees, looking around as if seeing the room for the first time. Perhaps he was. How often had he truly seen anything beyond his own desires? "Rebecca's taken the kids to her parents," he said after a moment of uncomfortable silence. "She says she needs time to think about our future." I said nothing, waiting. "The bank called in the mortgage on the house," he continued. "Apparently it was secured against my position at Jackson Development. I didn't even know that. I never read the paperwork." A bitter laugh escaped him. "I never read any paperwork. I just signed where you or the lawyers told me to sign." His admission confirmed what I had long suspected. Nathan had coasted through life on my efforts, never bothering to understand the mechanisms that supported his comfortable existence. "I've applied for a job with William." He said the words clearly difficult for him. "Not in management. In facilities maintenance. It's all he would offer." Facilities maintenance. I couldn't hide my surprise. Nathan had never so much as changed a light bulb in his life. "It's the only department with an opening," he explained, a flush of embarrassment coloring his cheeks. "Minimum wage, working under a supervisor who's been there 30 years. He looked up, meeting my eyes directly for the first time. "I'm taking it." The declaration hung in the air between us. My son, Harvard Business School graduate, former executive vice president of a multi-million-dollar company, was accepting a job scrubbing toilets and changing light bulbs. "Why?" I asked simply. "Because I need to work," he answered the words, seeming to surprise him as much as they did me. "I need to pay rent on the apartment I found. I need to show Rebecca and the kids that I can provide for them even without—" He gestured vaguely, encompassing everything that had been stripped away. I studied him, searching for signs of the manipulative child who had always known how to get around my rules, how to charm his way back into my good graces. Instead, I saw a man facing the consequences of his actions with a clarity born of desperation. "I won't ask you to reverse what you've done," he said after another silence. "I don't have that right. Not after—" his voice broke. "Not after what I did to you. In front of my children. In front of everyone." For the first time since that night, I allowed myself to fully feel the hurt of that moment, not just the physical impact of hitting the floor, but the public humiliation, the shattering of the illusion that my son respected me. "Do you know what Emma said to me yesterday?" Nathan continued, not waiting for my response. "She asked if I was the kind of man I wanted her to marry someday. A man who would push his mother down for a better seat at the table." His voice cracked again. I couldn't answer her. The image of my young granddaughter asking such a profound question caught me off guard. The wisdom of children often puts adults to shame. "I don't expect forgiveness," Nathan said, rising to his feet. "I just wanted you to know that I understand what you did. It was necessary. I see that now." As he moved toward the door, something in his defeated posture stirred the maternal instinct I had thought permanently damaged. Not enough to undo what I had set in motion, the lesson was still very much in progress, but enough to offer a small kindness. "Nathan," I called after him. He turned, his expression wary. "Let me know how the job goes." A flicker of surprise crossed his face, followed by a nod of acknowledgement. It wasn't forgiveness, wasn't reconciliation, but it was an opening, a tiny window left ajar in what had been a firmly shut door. After he left, I returned to my office, but the quarterly projections no longer held my attention. Instead, I found myself reflecting on the long arc of parenthood, how it never really ends, even when our children are adults themselves. The tools change from timeouts and allowance restrictions to more consequential measures, but the fundamental purpose remains the same: guiding them toward becoming their best selves. Had I failed Nathan by making his path too smooth, had Robert and I, in our desire to give him every advantage, inadvertently deprived him of the most important advantage of all, the opportunity to develop strength through struggle? The phone interrupted my reflections. William Bennett. "Evelyn, I've just had the most surprising conversation with your son," he began without preamble. He actually thanked me for offering him the maintenance position, said he was looking forward to learning practical skills. "And do you believe him?" I asked, curious about William's perception. "Surprisingly, yes," William replied, sounding genuinely puzzled. "There's something different about him. Broken, but perhaps in the way things sometimes need to break before they can be rebuilt properly." After we concluded our business discussion, I sat in the gathering darkness of my office, considering William's observation. Sometimes things need to break before they can be rebuilt properly. There was wisdom in that, painful though it might be to acknowledge. Outside my window, the city lights began to emerge against the darkening sky, each one a tiny beacon in the vast urban landscape. Somewhere out there, Nathan was facing his first night, in what was likely a modest apartment, contemplating a future far different from the one he had envisioned. And I was here in the penthouse, built from decades of hard work, surrounded by the symbols of my success, yet acutely aware of where that success had fallen short. The true measure of what I had set in motion wouldn't be visible for months, perhaps years. Would Nathan truly learn from this experience, or would he eventually find another way to coast through life? Would our relationship ever heal, or was the breach too profound? Only time would provide those answers. For now, I had done what was necessary, not just as a CEO protecting her company from an unqualified successor, but as a mother who had finally recognized that true love sometimes means allowing those we cherish to face the consequences of their actions. I turned from the window and reached for the framed photograph on my desk. Robert and me on the day we broke ground on our first major development project. We looked so young, so determined, our whole future stretched bright before us. I traced his face with my fingertip, wishing not for the first time that he was here to share the burden of these difficult decisions. "We did our best," I whispered to his smiling image. "Now we have to trust that it was enough." 2 weeks after our confrontation, I moved my entire office setup to my penthouse. The corporate headquarters of Jackson Development no longer felt like the sanctuary it once had. Too many curious glances, too many whispered conversations that abruptly ended when I entered a room. The story of a mother stripping her son of everything had spread throughout Chicago's business community like wildfire. Some called it ruthless brilliance, others unforgivable cruelty. I preferred to call it necessary justice. From my home office overlooking the Chicago skyline, I orchestrated a transformation of both business and personal domains. The Jackson-Bennett merger progressed swiftly, combining our complementary strengths in commercial real estate development. William proved to be the strategic partner I'd always suspected he could be, bringing fresh perspectives that challenged my long-established ways of thinking. Our collaboration yielded immediate results. A joint bid secured the contract for the Carson Street Revitalization Project, a $250 million undertaking that would reshape the city's downtown district. Each morning began with a video call with my executive team, followed by project reviews and investment analyses. In the afternoons, I turned my attention to a more personal project, redesigning the garden terrace that wrapped around my penthouse. What had once been Robert's domain with its meticulously arranged potted trees and stone benches was becoming my own sanctuary. I replaced formal topiaries with wildflowers, substituted rigid stone seating with curved wooden benches. The transformation reflected my own interior journey, from structured obligation to authentic expression. The first report on Nathan arrived via William 3 weeks after my son began his maintenance job. "He's showing up on time," William's text message read. "Jorge says he's clumsy but willing. Interesting development. He's staying 2 hours after shift ends to practice repairs. No one asked him to." I placed my phone down carefully, allowing the information to settle within me. Nathan voluntarily extending his workday to improve his skills. The concept was so foreign to everything I knew about my son that it felt almost like hearing about a stranger. This was a man who had spent his entire career delegating tasks that didn't interest him, leaving early for golf outings, expecting others to clean up his messes, both literal and figurative. The weekly calls with Tyler and Emma became the bright spots in my schedule. Their mother, Rebecca, had established a temporarily separate household in her parents' guest house, but allowed the children regular contact with both Nathan and me. Tyler, at 15, understood more of the adult complexities at play, but struggled with his changing perception of his father. Dad's hands are all messed up, he shared during one of our video calls, his brow furrowed with concern. He showed me the blisters from using tools all day, but he didn't complain about it, just said it was part of learning. Emma, with her 12-year-old wisdom, provided updates that cut straight to the emotional core. Dad cried yesterday, she said matter-of-factly during another call. We were having dinner in his new apartment, and he kept looking around at the small kitchen and the fold-out couch, and suddenly he had tears. He tried to hide them, but I saw. These glimpses into Nathan's new reality created complicated emotions within me. The mother in me ached at the thought of my child suffering. The businesswoman remained resolute that this path was necessary for his development. The two aspects of myself no longer seemed as contradictory as they once had. Perhaps true maternal love sometimes required the courage to allow painful growth. As winter gave way to early spring, I established a new weekend tradition. Saturday mornings with my grandchildren at the Art Institute of Chicago, followed by lunch at the Museum Cafe. These outings became sacred time, free from discussions of family discord or business dealings. Instead, we lost ourselves in Renaissance masterpieces and contemporary installations and conversations about color and form history and imagination. "Grandma, why do you think this painting is famous?" Emma asked one Saturday, standing before Edward Hopper's Nighthawks. I studied the iconic diner scene with its lonely figures illuminated against the darkness. "Because it captures how people can be alone together," I replied, choosing my words carefully. "How we can share a space yet remain isolated in our private thoughts. It's a painting about connection and disconnection at the same time." Emma nodded thoughtfully. "Like our family right now. The perceptiveness of children never ceased to amaze me." "Yes," I admitted. "Like our family right now." The following Tuesday, William requested a private meeting. He arrived at my penthouse carrying a thick folder and a troubled expression. He settled into an armchair across from my desk, placing the folder between us. "You need to see these, Evelyn." Inside were dozens of photographs, surveillance images of Nathan meeting with various executives from rival development companies over the past year. Each image was date-stamped with locations ranging from upscale restaurants to golf courses to hotel lobbies. "My security team compiled these as part of the merger due diligence," William explained, his voice heavy with reluctance. "Nathan has been shopping Jackson Development's proprietary information to at least 3 competitors. We've confirmed financial transfers to offshore accounts. He's been selling your company's secrets for nearly 18 months. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Business betrayal layered upon personal betrayal. The pattern was sickening in its completeness. My chest tightened with a cold fury that momentarily robbed me of speech. The strategic removal of Nathan from the company now seemed not just justified, but catastrophically overdue. "How much damage?" I finally managed, professional instinct taking over where emotional response failed me. "Significant. Primarily focused on land acquisition strategies and financing structures. We've identified at least 6 deals where competitors leveraged insider knowledge to outmaneuver Jackson Development." My mind raced to calculate the financial implications. Those 6 deals alone represented tens of millions in lost opportunities. But the cost to company morale, to our reputation for integrity, to client trust, those damages were incalculable. "I need to call Marcus," I said, reaching for my phone to contact my attorney. William placed his hand on the folder. "There's more." He hesitated, uncharacteristically reluctant to continue. "The preliminary evidence suggests Rebecca may have been involved. Her background in finance made her well-positioned to help Nathan navigate the more complex aspects of the transactions." The possibility that Rebecca had participated in Nathan's betrayal added another layer of horror to the situation. Had they laughed together about deceiving me? Had they used the money to fund their lavish lifestyle while pretending loyalty to the company that provided their privileged existence? "I've already begun legal proceedings," I informed William, my voice steadier than I felt. "Corporate espionage carries severe penalties. Nathan will face criminal charges." William's expression revealed genuine concern. "Are you certain you want to pursue that course? He's still your son?" I stood and walked to the window, gazing out at the city where I had built my empire brick by brick. "A son who pushed his mother to the ground," I reminded him quietly. "A son who sold company secrets while accepting a 7-figure salary. At some point, William, the distinction between justice and mercy becomes a dangerous blurring of necessary boundaries." After William left, I remained at the window for a long time watching cloud shadows move across the urban landscape. The revelation of Nathan's corporate espionage shifted something fundamental within me. The glimmer of hope I had nurtured, that his maintenance job might represent genuine change, now seemed a foolish maternal indulgence. The man working under Jorge was the same man who had systematically betrayed the company his father and I had built. Only his circumstances had changed, not his character. I called Marcus and instructed him to prepare both criminal charges and civil litigation. Then I poured myself a glass of scotch and retrieved a weathered leather journal from my desk drawer. Robert's journal, his private thoughts recorded during Nathan's turbulent teenage years. I had avoided reading it since his death, finding the memories too painful. Now I opened it with purpose, searching for insight for confirmation that the difficult path I was choosing had historical roots. April 15th, 2002. Nathan failed his midterms again. Found vodka bottles hidden in his closet. When confronted, he blamed his roommate. The ease of his lying troubles me deeply. Evelyn believes in second chances and the power of unconditional love to heal. I'm beginning to fear that our different approaches are creating dangerous inconsistency. He manipulates her compassion masterfully. June 22, 2003. Another call from campus security. Nathan took my company credit card and charged $4,800 at a casino. Evelyn wanted to pay it off quietly. I insisted he work it off at the warehouse this summer. She overruled me, said his internship at Merrill Lynch was too important for his future. I worry we're raising a man who will never understand consequences. August 30, 2004, the incident with the Thompson girl has been resolved through legal channels. Evelyn believes Nathan's claim that it was all a misunderstanding. I'm less convinced. Something in his eyes when he explains himself, a calculated emptiness. I love my son, but I fear the man he's becoming. December 25, 2004, Christmas dinner argument. Nathan accused me of never supporting him, of always seeing the worst in him. Stormed out before dessert. Evelyn blames me for being too harsh. How can I make her see that our different standards are tearing apart the fabric of this family? Our son needs unified boundaries, not divided loyalties to exploit. The entries continued page after page of Robert's growing concern, his frustrated attempts to instill accountability in our son, my own resistance to his stricter approach. Reading them now with 20 years of hindsight and Nathan's latest betrayal fresh in my mind, I could see the pattern with painful clarity. Robert had recognized early what I had refused to acknowledge until pushed to the floor, that our son had developed a dangerous sense of entitlement, an ability to rationalize his worst behaviors, a talent for manipulating those who loved him. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus confirming our meeting with the district attorney tomorrow morning. The machinery of justice was now in motion, inexorable and impersonal. Whatever small spark of maternal leniency might have remained was extinguished by the evidence in William's folder and the confirmation in Robert's journal. Nathan would face the full consequences of his actions, not just as my son, but as any executive who betrayed company trust. That night I dreamed of Robert. We were walking through the unfinished shell of our first major building project, hard hats on blueprints in hand. "The foundation determines everything," he said in the dream, pointing to the massive concrete base beneath our feet. "If it's flawed, no amount of beautiful finishing work can save the structure." I woke with tears on my face and his words echoing in my mind. The next morning, Marcus and I met with Assistant District Attorney Priya Sharma. Her office overlooked Millennium Park, the pristine view contrasting sharply with the ugly business at hand. She reviewed the evidence William had provided, along with additional documentation Marcus had compiled, her expression growing increasingly grave. "The case is strong," she confirmed, closing the file. "Corporate espionage, wire fraud, breach of fiduciary duty. We're talking potential federal charges, Mrs. Jackson. Once we move forward, there's no turning back. Are you prepared for what this means for your family?" The question hung in the air between us. Was I prepared to see my only child potentially imprisoned, to have the Jackson name splashed across headlines linking us to corporate crime, to face the inevitable public questioning of my own leadership, my own parenting? My family was damaged long before today. I answered finally. I'm prepared to see justice served regardless of the name of the perpetrator. Priya nodded, satisfied with my resolve. "We'll convene a grand jury next week. In the meantime, I suggest you prepare your company for the publicity storm that's coming." The following days passed in a blur of legal preparation and corporate damage control. I assembled the board for an emergency meeting presenting the evidence of Nathan's betrayal with the clinical detachment of a surgeon discussing a malignancy. Their shock quickly transformed into strategic concern. How to minimize reputational damage, how to reassure clients, how to prevent similar security breaches in the future. "We need to get ahead of this story," advised Gerald Winters, our most experienced board member. "Full transparency with our stakeholders, coupled with clear evidence of the steps we're taking to strengthen compliance and security measures." By Friday, we had developed a comprehensive crisis management plan. The public announcement would coincide with the grand jury proceedings framing the narrative as Jackson Development taking decisive action against corporate espionage regardless of family ties. The message would be clear: no one was above accountability at our company, not even the founder's son. As these professional mechanisms whirred efficiently into motion, my personal life fractured further. Rebecca filed for legal separation, citing the irreparable breakdown of her marriage. Through her attorney, she requested that I continue my relationship with Tyler and Emma, but asked for space while the legal situations unfolded. Reading between the lines of the carefully worded legal communication, I understood she was distancing herself from both Nathan and me, positioning herself as an unwitting bystander rather than a potential accomplice. Saturday morning, I received a call from an unfamiliar number. Jorge Martinez, Nathan's supervisor from the maintenance department. "Mrs. Jackson, I hope you don't mind me calling." He began, his voice carrying the slight accent of his Mexican heritage. "I felt I should speak with you directly about Nathan's situation. I steeled myself for complaints for confirmation of Nathan's failure, even at this basic job. I appreciate your call, Mr. Martinez. What can I do for you?" "I wanted you to know that your son has been working very hard," Jorge continued, surprising me. "He started knowing nothing, couldn't even use a screwdriver properly. But he listens, he learns, he stays late to practice. The blisters on his hands became calluses. He never complains, never mentions his former position. He eats lunch with my crew, asks about their families." The description was so at odds with the evidence of corporate betrayal that I struggled to reconcile the two versions of Nathan. "I appreciate your perspective, Mr. Martinez, but I'm afraid there are other factors at play that you may not be aware of." "With respect, Mrs. Jackson, I am aware. Mr. Bennett informed me this morning that Nathan will likely face criminal charges, that he sold company secrets." Jorge paused. "I have supervised men for 35 years. I have seen those who pretend to change and those who truly transform. Your son is different now than when he first arrived. Something real is happening inside him." After we disconnected, I sat motionless, Jorge's words reverberating through my consciousness. Could Nathan truly be changing while simultaneously facing consequences for his past betrayals? Or was this another manipulation? Ingratiate himself with the maintenance crew as a backup plan, a character witness for the inevitable trial. The grand jury convened on Tuesday morning. By Tuesday afternoon, they had returned indictments on all recommended charges. Nathan was arrested at his apartment that evening, the process handled discreetly to minimize media attention. Marcus arranged for bail conditional upon Nathan surrendering his passport and agreeing to electronic monitoring. Wednesday brought the public announcement from Jackson Development, carefully crafted press releases detailing the company's commitment to ethical business practices and appropriate accountability. The financial markets responded with initial volatility, followed by stabilization, as investors processed the information and recognized the company's transparent approach as a sign of institutional integrity. By Wednesday night, the story had spread across local and national business news. "Heir apparent arrested for corporate espionage," blared one headline. "Mother brings criminal charges against son," proclaimed another. The personal angle proved irresistible to media outlets, with commentators dissecting the psychological implications of a mother's willingness to pursue legal action against her child. Thursday morning, Nathan requested a meeting. His attorney advised against it. My attorney advised the same. We both ignored legal counsel and arranged to meet at Marcus's office, neutral territory with proper security protocols given Nathan's bail conditions. When Nathan was escorted into the conference room, I barely recognized him. The physical transformation was striking. He had lost weight, his designer wardrobe replaced by simple jeans and a work shirt, his manicured hands now rough and calloused. But the most profound change was in his eyes. The entitled arrogance had vanished, replaced by a wary humility that seemed carved into his features. He sat across from me, hands folded on the table between us. "Thank you for agreeing to see me." Marcus advised against it, I replied, maintaining emotional distance despite the visceral shock of his altered appearance. So did Stanley, Nathan acknowledged, referring to his defense attorney. But some conversations need to happen regardless of legal strategy. The fluorescent lighting cast harsh shadows across his face, emphasizing the new lines around his eyes, the hollows beneath his cheekbones. This was not the pampered executive who had pushed me to the ground 3 months ago. This was a man who had been broken down to his foundation. "I won't fight the charges," he stated plainly, his voice steady, despite the enormity of what he was saying. "I did everything they're accusing me of and worse. I'll plead guilty and accept whatever sentence is imposed." This was not the approach I had anticipated. A contested trial, claims of misunderstanding or entrapment attempts to minimize his culpability. These were the tactics I had expected from the son I thought I knew. "Why?" I asked simply. "Because I am guilty," he answered, meeting my gaze directly. "Of betraying the company, of betraying you and Dad, of living a life built on lies and self-importance." He exhaled slowly. "Jorge told me once that a man's true character isn't revealed when things are easy, but when everything is stripped away. I've been stripped down to nothing, Mom, and what I found beneath all the trappings wasn't pretty." I searched his face for signs of manipulation, for the calculated charm he had deployed throughout his life when backed into corners. I found only exhausted sincerity. Working with my hands these past weeks, fixing things that are actually broken, solving concrete problems, "It's the first honest work I've ever done," he continued. I was starting to feel something like real pride. Not the false pride of position or possessions, but the satisfaction of actual accomplishment. A bitter smile crossed his face. And then the arrest happened, and I realized that whatever small progress I was making can't erase what I've done. The conference room fell silent, except for the soft hum of the air conditioning. Outside the windows, Chicago continued its midday bustle, oblivious to the human drama unfolding within these walls. I studied my son, trying to reconcile this apparently transformed man with both the corporate criminal and the entitled bully from Christmas dinner. "Rebecca's filed for divorce," Nathan said, finally breaking the silence. "She's denying any knowledge of the corporate espionage, saying she thought our extra income came from successful personal investments." "Did it?" I asked, unable to keep the skepticism from my voice. "No," she knew. His admission carried no anger, just resigned acceptance. "She managed the offshore accounts, helped me understand which information would be most valuable to competitors. But I don't blame her. I created the lifestyle she became accustomed to. I made promises about the future I couldn't legitimately keep. When things started getting financially tight a few years ago, selling company information seemed like an easy solution. The casual acknowledgement of his betrayal's duration hit me with fresh force. Years, not months. Dozens of strategic decisions, hundreds of confidential meetings, all potentially compromised. "The children," I managed to ask, focusing on what mattered most to both of us. "She's allowing supervised visits for now." Pain flashed across his features. "Emma won't look at me. Tyler asks questions I don't know how to answer." Another silence descended, heavier than the first. Outside clouds gathered, dimming the natural light filtering through the windows. In that muted illumination, Nathan seemed suddenly older, the weight of consequence physically manifested in the slump of his shoulders. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said, echoing his words from our previous meeting. "I just wanted you to know that I understand why you've done what you've done. All of it. Removing me from the company, freezing the accounts, pressing charges. It was necessary. I see that now." His acceptance should have felt vindicating. Instead, it created a complicated ache beneath my ribs, a bittersweet recognition that my son's awakening had come at such tremendous cost to everyone involved. "The prosecutors are offering a deal," Nathan continued. 5 years with possibility of parole after 3 in exchange for full cooperation in identifying all compromised information and testifying against the executives who purchased it. The sentence was substantial, but far less than the maximum possible under the charges. Still, the image of my son spending years in federal prison created a visceral distress that surprised me with its intensity. "Your children need their father," I said quietly. "Their father needs to show them that actions have consequences," he countered. "That integrity matters more than comfort, that making amends is more important than making excuses." His voice caught slightly. All the lessons I should have learned decades ago. As our meeting concluded and Nathan was escorted back to the monitoring authorities, I remained in the conference room processing the conversation. Marcus returned, closing the door quietly behind him. "That was unexpected," he observed, taking the seat Nathan had vacated. "Stanley called me. Says Nathan is insisting on the guilty plea despite his advice to fight the charges." "Do you think it's genuine?" I asked, still uncertain despite the compelling performance I had just witnessed. This transformation. Marcus considered the question seriously, his decades of legal experience lending weight to his assessment. Criminal defense creates a strange intimacy between attorney and client. Stanley believes it's real. Says Nathan rejected several potential strategies that might have reduced his culpability at the expense of others. That's unusual in white-collar cases. That evening, alone in my penthouse, I poured myself a glass of wine and stepped out onto the terrace garden. The early spring air carried a bite of lingering winter, but tender green shoots were visible among the newly planted flower beds. Life reasserting itself after dormancy growth emerging from what had appeared dead. My phone buzzed with a text from William. Jorge submitted a formal character reference letter for Nathan to the court. Says he's never seen someone work harder to change. Thought you should know. I set the phone down beside my wine glass and gazed out at the city lights blinking on as dusk settled over Chicago. The evidence of Nathan's betrayal was irrefutable. The legal consequences would proceed regardless of my personal feelings. But something was happening beneath that judicial process, something unexpected and possibly profound. The following morning, I received a call from Nathan's attorney. "Mrs. Jackson, I hope I'm not overstepping, but I wanted to share something Nathan wrote last night. He's been keeping a journal since he started the maintenance job. Part of his personal accountability process, apparently. He asked me to read you this entry if you're willing to listen." Curiosity overcame my reservations. "Go ahead." Stanley cleared his throat and began reading. "Today, I finally told Mom the full truth. I expected to see hatred in her eyes. It would be justified after everything I've done. Instead, I saw something that might have been worse disappointment, layered with resignation, as if my betrayals confirmed something she had long suspected, but hoped wasn't true. Dad used to say that a person's character is revealed not by their words, but by what they do when no one is watching. For years, I've been someone else entirely when no one was looking. Dishonest, selfish, willing to sacrifice others' hard work for my own gain. The maintenance job was changing me before the arrest happened. Jorge showed me what real dignity looks like, doing honest work with care and pride, regardless of status or recognition. I don't know if I'll ever get the chance to become that kind of man now, but I understand for the first time why it matters to try. After Stanley finished reading, I sat in silence, absorbing the words. They carried an authenticity that was difficult to dismiss, an introspection I had never associated with my son. "Thank you for sharing that," I said finally. "It gives me something to consider." The next day brought a development I hadn't anticipated. Rebecca's attorney contacted Marcus with a startling proposal. In exchange for immunity from prosecution, Rebecca was prepared to provide detailed evidence of her own involvement in the corporate espionage, along with communications implicating executives at 3 competing firms who had purchased Jackson Development's proprietary information. "This changes the calculation significantly," Marcus explained during our emergency meeting. Her testimony would strengthen the cases against the other companies involved, potentially allowing Jackson Development to recover substantial damages. But it would also publicly confirm her role as an active participant, rather than an unwitting spouse. I considered the implications carefully. And Nathan's situation, unchanged from a legal perspective. His guilty plea proceeds as planned, but this would mean both parents potentially absent from the children's lives, one in prison, one labeled a cooperating witness in corporate crime. That's a heavy burden for teenagers to bear. The human cost of these legal proceedings suddenly loomed larger than the corporate considerations. Tyler and Emma, innocent bystanders caught in the implosion of their parents' choices. I thought of my own grandparents who had raised me after my parents' death in a car accident when I was 11. The profound impact of that disruption had shaped my entire life, creating both resilience and persistent insecurities. What about the children? I asked the question that had been circling my mind since Nathan's arrest. Marcus sighed, removing his glasses to rub the bridge of his nose. Rebecca's parents have indicated they're willing to take temporary custody, but they're in their 70s, Evelyn, and they split their time between Chicago and Arizona. It's not an ideal arrangement for teenagers. An alternative possibility formed in my mind, unexpected but increasingly compelling. "I could take them," I heard myself say. If the courts and Rebecca would permit it. Marcus raised an eyebrow. You'd assume custody of your grandchildren while simultaneously prosecuting their father and providing evidence against their mother. That's an exceptionally complicated dynamic, Evelyn. No more complicated than what they're already experiencing, I countered. At least with me, they'd have stability, continuity of schooling, and the emotional support of someone who loves them unconditionally. The idea took root over the next several days, growing from possibility to plan. I consulted with family law specialists, had my home evaluated for suitability, and prepared a formal custody proposal. To my surprise, Rebecca's attorney indicated her tentative support for the arrangement. Whether motivated by genuine concern for her children's welfare or strategic legal positioning, Rebecca was willing to grant me temporary guardianship while the legal proceedings unfolded. Nathan's response conveyed through Stanley was immediate and unequivocal. I trust my mother with my children more than anyone else in the world. They should be with her. The court approved the temporary guardianship arrangement pending further review. Within 2 weeks of Nathan's arrest, Tyler and Emma moved into my penthouse, bringing suitcases, school supplies, and the shell-shocked expressions of children whose foundations had crumbled beneath them. I converted my home office into Emma's bedroom, ordering furniture that matched her previous room's decor. Tyler took the guest suite, the walls soon covered with posters of bands I didn't recognize, and athletes I knew only vaguely. We established new routines: breakfast together before school, dinner at the dining table each evening, homework at the kitchen counter where I could offer assistance if needed. The adjustment period was predictably turbulent. Emma alternated between clingy attachment and sullen withdrawal. Tyler maintained a stoic facade that occasionally cracked into fury or tears without warning. Both children flinched when their parents were mentioned, changed the subject when friends asked questions they couldn't answer, flailed against the unfairness of their circumstances. Through it all, I maintained the steady presence I remembered my own grandmother providing during my childhood upheaval. Consistent, unflappable, a solid shore against which their emotional storms could break without fear of judgment or abandonment. One evening, about 3 weeks into our new living arrangement, I found Tyler sitting alone on the terrace, staring out at the cityscape with red-rimmed eyes. A girl at school asked why I'm living with my grandmother now, he said without preamble. I didn't know what to say without making Dad sound like a criminal. Your father is facing consequences for choices he made, I replied carefully, sitting beside him. That's a complicated truth, but not one you need to hide or simplify for others' comfort. Tyler's jaw tightened. But he is a criminal. He stole from your company. He's going to prison. Yes, I acknowledged. And he's also the man who taught you to ride a bike, who coached your baseball team, who loves you more than his own life. How can both things be true? Tyler demanded adolescent absolutism, seeking clear categories of good and evil. Because people are more than their worst mistakes, I said after a thoughtful pause. Your father did serious wrong. He's accepting responsibility for that wrong, and he remains worthy of love, especially yours. Tyler absorbed this, his young face working through complex emotions. Mom says she didn't know what Dad was doing. Do you believe her? The question pierced straight to the heart of the adult complexities we had tried to shield the children from. I chose my words with extreme care. I believe your mother loves you and Emma very much. I believe she's doing what she thinks is necessary right now. The legal situation will sort itself out over time. That's not an answer, Tyler observed, displaying the perceptiveness that reminded me so much of Robert. No, I agreed. It's not. Some questions don't have simple answers, especially when they involve people we love. As April turned to May, our household settled into its new rhythms. I arranged my work schedule around the children's needs, delegating more responsibility to my executive team while maintaining oversight of critical decisions. William Bennett became an unexpected ally, offering business support that allowed me to focus on my grandchildren's well-being during this crucial transition period. Nathan's guilty plea was formally accepted by the court. Sentencing was scheduled for June. His attorney recommended character witnesses who might influence the judge toward leniency. To everyone's surprise, Jorge Martinez volunteered immediately, as did 2 other members of the maintenance team who had worked alongside Nathan during his brief employment there. On a rainy Tuesday afternoon, I received another call from Jorge. Mrs. Jackson, I hope you don't mind me reaching out again. There's something I think you should see. He explained that Nathan had been working on a special project during his off hours at the maintenance facility, a detailed wooden jewelry box with intricate carving. He finished it just before the arrest. Asked me to hold it for him. Said it was for Emma's birthday next month. I thought perhaps you might want it since he won't be able to give it to her himself. The gesture touched me unexpectedly. Nathan learning woodworking skills in his limited free time, creating something with his hands for his daughter. It was another piece of evidence suggesting genuine change rather than calculated performance. I'd be happy to pick it up, I told Jorge. Emma's birthday is in 3 weeks. It would mean a great deal to her to have something her father made. That weekend I drove to the maintenance facility where Nathan had briefly worked. Jorge met me in the workshop, a spacious room filled with tools and the pleasant scent of sawdust. From a locked cabinet, he retrieved a wooden box about the size of a thick novel made from cherry wood, with a darker walnut inlay forming Emma's initials on the lid. He worked on this for 6 weeks, Jorge explained, handling the box with evident respect. Started with basic tools training practiced on scrap wood. Many failed attempts before he got it right. He was here some nights until midnight. I examined the box carefully. The craftsmanship was imperfect but earnest. Joints that didn't quite align, a finish slightly uneven in places. But the overall effect was beautiful in its evident care and intention. Inside, Nathan had lined the compartments with velvet and installed a tiny mechanism that played the first notes of Emma's favorite song when the lid was opened. He was very hard on himself about the imperfections, Jorge continued. I told him those are what make it personal, what show it was made by human hands that care. As I prepared to leave with the jewelry box secured carefully in a padded bag, Jorge walked me to my car. Mrs. Jackson, may I speak freely? Of course. I have supervised many men in my 35 years here. Some good, some not so good. Some who work only for a paycheck. Others who find meaning in what they do. He paused, collecting his thoughts. Your son arrived here broken inside. Angry, ashamed, empty. But something happened while he worked with us. He began to change. Not the surface changes that come and go, but something deeper. In his eyes, in how he carried himself, in how he treated others. Jorge's assessment aligned with the evidence I had been gathering. Nathan's journal entries, his acceptance of responsibility, his concern for his children despite his own circumstances, all pointing toward an authentic transformation rather than a strategic performance. The legal consequences can't be avoided, I acknowledged. But I appreciate your perspective, Mr. Martinez. It matters. That evening, I placed the jewelry box on my desk, studying it as I might examine a complex contract or investment opportunity. The physical object represented something intangible, yet potentially significant. Evidence that Nathan was capable of change, of growth, of becoming something more than the sum of his worst choices. My phone rang. William Bennett calling with an update on Rebecca's cooperation with prosecutors. She's provided everything they asked for, he reported. Dates, amounts, names. The cases against the competing firms are proceeding quickly. First indictments against their executives expected next week. And the immunity agreement. Holding firm. She won't face criminal charges, though the civil liability remains substantial. Her attorney is proposing a settlement structure that would liquidate most of her assets, but leave enough for her eventual fresh start. I considered this information, weighing its implications for my grandchildren's future. And what's your assessment of her state of mind through all this? The children miss their mother. William's voice softened slightly. She's struggling, Evelyn. Frightened, remorseful, trying to salvage what she can from the wreckage. Not unlike Nathan in that regard. After we disconnected, I sat with the parallel trajectories of my son and his wife, both facing the consequences of their choices, both stripped of their former privileges, both attempting to navigate the aftermath of spectacular failure. Their children caught in the turbulence, trying to make sense of adult complexities beyond their years. I picked up the wooden jewelry box again, running my fingers over the carved initials, feeling the slight roughness where Nathan's inexperienced hands had worked the wood. An imperfect object created with genuine care and effort. A tangible symbol of change amid the wreckage of poor choices. Perhaps there was wisdom in that metaphor, not just for Nathan, but for all of us caught in this painful family dissolution. We were each in our own way attempting to create something meaningful from the splintered remains of what had been broken. The results would inevitably bear the marks of our struggle, the visible imperfections of human effort. But there might yet be beauty in what emerged precisely because it carried the evidence of hard-won growth. I placed the jewelry box on my bedside table, a reminder of complexity and possibility as I navigated the challenging weeks ahead. Nathan's sentencing, Rebecca's settlement negotiations, The children's ongoing adjustment to their radically altered circumstances. My own evolution from vengeful mother to something more nuanced. A woman seeking justice while simultaneously holding space for redemption. The next morning I woke early and went to the terrace garden where the spring plantings were now flourishing in earnest. Delicate blooms reached toward the sun, their colors vibrant against the backdrop of concrete and steel that defined the Chicago skyline. Life asserting itself amid the urban hardscape beauty emerging from unlikely soil. I touched a particularly resilient blossom that had pushed through a crack in the stone wall, not where I had planted it, but where it had found its own path toward light. Perhaps that was the lesson in all of this. Growth happens not according to our careful plans, but through the persistent force of necessary change, finding unexpected routes toward transformation. Tyler joined me on this terrace, his hair tousled from sleep, but his eyes clearer than they had been in weeks. Dad's sentencing is next Tuesday, right? Yes. I confirmed, watching him carefully. I want to be there. He stated, his young voice steady with resolve. I want him to see that I'm not giving up on him, even if he did really bad things. The wisdom in my grandson's words caught me by surprise. The recognition that accountability and abandonment are not the same thing, that justice and continued relationship can coexist. Perhaps we had all been learning similar lessons, each in our own way. We'll go together. I promised, placing my hand on his shoulder and feeling the solid strength that was beginning to replace childhood softness. As a family, the federal courthouse stood imposing against the June sky, its limestone facade gleaming in the morning sun. Tyler walked beside me, his shoulders squared with a determination that belied his 15 years. Emma had chosen to remain at home, unable to face the public spectacle of her father's sentencing. At 13, she still struggled to reconcile the loving dad from her childhood with the criminal described in news articles. The wooden jewelry box he'd made her remained unopened on her dresser, acknowledged but untouched, much like her complicated feelings toward him. Inside the courtroom, the polished wooden benches filled quickly with reporters, legal observers, and business associates. The high-profile nature of the case, heir to real estate empire, Betray's family company, had captured public imagination in ways that ordinary corporate espionage never would. Nathan sat at the defense table in a modest suit that hung loosely on his thinner frame, his attorney whispering final instructions as they waited for proceedings to begin. When Nathan turned and saw Tyler, something flickered across his face, surprise followed by a wave of emotion so raw it was painful to witness. He hadn't expected his son to attend, hadn't asked for this show of support that now visibly overwhelmed him. Tyler nodded once, a silent communication between father and son that carried more meaning than words could convey. The proceedings moved with the formal rhythm particular to federal court. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s with steel-gray hair and penetrating eyes, reviewed the case details, the plea agreement, the sentencing guidelines. Nathan's attorney presented mitigating factors: cooperation with authorities, acceptance of responsibility, lack of previous criminal history. Jorge Martinez took the stand as a character witness, describing Nathan's transformation from entitled executive to humble worker eager to learn and contribute. Then Nathan himself stood to address the court, his voice steady despite the circumstances. Your Honor, I won't waste the court's time with excuses or explanations. What I did was wrong, a betrayal of my family's company, my colleagues' trust, and the values my parents tried to instill in me. I accept full responsibility and the consequences that follow. My only hope is that someday my children might understand that a person can change, can learn from terrible mistakes, can become someone worthy of their respect again. I'm not there yet, but I'm trying. The judge studied him for a long moment before delivering her ruling. 42 months in federal prison followed by 3 years of supervised release. A substantial fine. Restitution to Jackson Development. The sentence was within expected parameters, neither the maximum penalty nor the minimum. Just punishment for serious crimes tempered by recognition of genuine remorse and cooperation. As Nathan was led away by U.S. Marshals, he looked back once at Tyler, mouthing words I couldn't hear, but could easily interpret. I love you. I'm sorry. Tyler maintained his composure until we reached the privacy of our waiting car, where he finally allowed silent tears to fall his young face, a study in conflicting emotions. Love, loyalty, disappointment, grief. He seemed different, Tyler observed quietly as David navigated through downtown traffic. Not like before. How so? I asked, curious about my grandson's perception. More real, he replied after consideration. like he wasn't trying to be anyone except himself. The observation lingered with me throughout the day, Nathan stripped of pretense, finally authentic in a way that prison jumpsuit could not explain alone. Perhaps true transformation begins only when we can no longer hide behind the identities we've constructed when we're forced to confront who we actually are beneath the accumulated layers of self-deception. Summer stretched before us, a season of adjustment to our new reality. Tyler and Emma settled into the rhythms of life in my penthouse, their initial resistance giving way to grudging appreciation for the stability I provided. I hired a college student as a part-time companion for Emma, recognizing that a 13-year-old girl needed someone younger than her grandmother to relate to. Tyler found unexpected solace in helping me with the terrace garden, his teenage hands surprisingly gentle with delicate seedlings. Rebecca's cooperation with federal prosecutors concluded successfully, resulting in multiple indictments against executives who had purchased Jackson Development's proprietary information. True to their agreement, she received immunity from criminal prosecution, but faced substantial civil penalties. The divorce from Nathan proceeded uncontested, their once glamorous union dissolved through paperwork and attorneys' meetings. By July, Rebecca had relocated to a modest apartment in Lincoln Park, having liquidated most assets as part of her settlement with Jackson Development. The custody arrangement evolved to include weekend visits with her, an arrangement that brought both joy and tension to our household. The children returned from these visits emotionally drained, caught between their mother's narrative of events and the reality they witnessed daily in my home. Mom says she didn't know what Dad was doing until it was too late, Emma reported after one such visit, her voice carrying the bewilderment of a child trying to make sense of adult complexities. She says she was just trying to protect us by not asking questions. I measured my response carefully, aware of the delicate balance required. Your mother is working through her own understanding of what happened. What matters most is that both your parents love you very much, regardless of the mistakes they've made. Nathan's entry into the federal prison system brought a new routine to our lives. Approved phone calls every Sunday evening, monitored email exchanges through the prison communication system, monthly visits to the medium security facility in Minnesota where he served his sentence. These visits initially terrified the children: metal detectors, stern guards, institutional green walls, but gradually became normalized, another facet of their dramatically altered lives. During our first visit, Emma refused to speak, staring at the floor, while Nathan tried desperately to connect with her. Tyler maintained stilted conversation, answering questions with minimal words, his discomfort evident in rigid posture, and avoided eye contact. Nathan accepted their reactions with painful grace, never pushing, never complaining about his circumstances, expressing only concern for their well-being. "Are they adjusting okay?" he asked me as our visiting time neared its end, the children having stepped away for vending machine snacks. "Is Emma sleeping better?" Tyler mentioned nightmares. "They're resilient," I assured him. "The therapist says they're processing things as well as can be expected. The stability helps." Nathan nodded, guilt and gratitude battling across his features. "Thank you for taking them, for being what they need right now." "They're my grandchildren," I replied simply. It was never a question. As summer progressed into fall, a tentative healing began within our fractured family. The children's second visit to the prison brought noticeable changes. Emma actually spoke, sharing details about school and friends. Tyler brought a chess set, the familiar game-creating structure for interaction that felt almost normal. By the third visit, something remarkable occurred. Genuine laughter as Nathan recounted a story about prison cooking classes, the children momentarily forgetting the circumstances as they enjoyed their father's self-deprecating humor. October brought the launch of the Jackson Bennett Foundation, the charitable organization William and I had established, focusing on vocational training for underserved communities. The foundation represented not just strategic business collaboration, but personal redemption, a way to create meaning from the wreckage of Nathan's betrayal. Our first initiative established maintenance training programs in community centers throughout Chicago's struggling neighborhoods, teaching practical skills that could lead to stable employment. The irony wasn't lost on me. Nathan's brief experience in maintenance had sparked the idea for a program that would now help hundreds of people. During one of our Sunday phone calls, I described the initiative to him, seeking his input based on his unique perspective. "What was most valuable about your training with Jorge?" I asked. "What elements should we incorporate into the program?" Nathan considered the question with seriousness it deserved. "The dignity," he answered finally. Jorge approached every task, no matter how small, with pride and attention to detail. He taught me that there's honor in fixing things and making something work properly again. That's the heart of it, not just technical skills, but the mindset that maintenance work matters, that it deserves respect. His insight shaped the program's development in fundamental ways. Beyond practical curriculum, we incorporated mentorship components, ethics training, and emphasis on professional pride. Jorge Martinez agreed to serve as lead instructor for the pilot program, his decades of experience and natural teaching ability proving invaluable. The foundation's opening ceremony took place at a renovated community center on Chicago's South Side. William and I stood together on the small stage facing an audience of community leaders, potential students, and media representatives. The press release had deliberately mentioned Nathan's role in inspiring the program, not hiding his crimes, but acknowledging how his experience had sparked something constructive. It was a calculated risk, one that could have backfired spectacularly. Instead, it generated thoughtful coverage about redemption and second chances, themes that resonated deeply in communities where many had made serious mistakes in their past. What began as a family tragedy has evolved into an opportunity for community transformation, I told the assembled crowd. Sometimes our deepest failures can, if we're willing to learn from them, lead to our most meaningful contributions. As autumn leaves turned golden across Chicago, Emma celebrated her 13th birthday. The occasion prompted another milestone. She finally opened the wooden jewelry box Nathan had made. The simple melody played as she explored the compartments, her fingers tracing the imperfect craftsmanship with newfound appreciation. "He really made this himself?" she asked, wonder replacing the defensiveness that had characterized her attitude toward Nathan for months. "From scratch," I confirmed. Jorge said he worked on it for weeks, staying late after his shift to learn the techniques. Emma placed the box in a prominent position on her dresser, a silent acknowledgement of shifting perspectives. That evening during Nathan's call, she spoke to him without prompting, describing her birthday celebration in detail, thanking him for the handmade gift. "It's really beautiful, Dad," she said, her voice carrying across the speakerphone. "I'm using it for my special things." Nathan's response came after a moment of emotion-laden silence. "I'm glad you like it, sweetheart. It has all my love built into it." November brought unexpected professional developments. The civil litigation against competing firms that had purchased Jackson Development's proprietary information resulted in substantial settlements. These companies, eager to avoid the public relations disaster of protracted legal battles, agreed to financial compensation far exceeding the actual damages. The settlements replenished company coffers and restored market confidence. Jackson Development stock reaching new highs as investors recognized the firm's resilience. William and I used this opportunity to expand our partnership beyond crisis management into strategic growth. The Carson Street Revitalization Project progressed ahead of schedule, our complementary business approaches yielding efficiencies neither company could have achieved alone. What had begun as a pragmatic response to betrayal evolved into a genuinely productive collaboration, with regular strategy sessions in my penthouse becoming highlights of my professional week. During one such session, as we reviewed architectural renderings for a new mixed-use development, William broached a sensitive subject. "Nathan's been writing to me," he revealed, setting aside the blueprints. "Thoughtful letters about business ethics, about the foundation, about making amends. He's asked if I might consider him for a position with the maintenance training program after his release." The request caught me by surprise. He'd be a convicted felon with a corporate espionage record applying to work with a foundation that bears his family name. The optics would be challenging. "Challenging, but potentially powerful," William countered. "What better instructor for a second chance program than someone who embodies that journey, someone who fell from corporate heights to prison, who learned maintenance work from necessity rather than choice?" The proposition contained both practical risk and symbolic potential. I promised to consider it carefully, though Nathan's release remained nearly 3 years distant. That evening, I mentioned the conversation to Tyler during our nightly chess game, curious about his reaction. Tyler contemplated the chessboard before responding, his strategic thinking extending beyond the game pieces. "It would be weird at first," he acknowledged, "but maybe good weird, like he'd actually be doing something real instead of just talking about business deals all day." "You didn't think his previous work was real?" I prompted, intrigued by this perspective. Tyler moved his knight with deliberate precision. "Dad used to come home and I'd ask what he did that day. He never had an actual answer, just meetings and calls and stuff. But when he worked with Jorge, he'd show me calluses and tell me about fixing broken pipes or rewiring electrical panels. He seemed more interested in his own life. The insight carried weight beyond Tyler's years, a recognition that meaning often emerges from tangible contribution rather than abstract achievement. Nathan's corporate position had provided status and income, but apparently little genuine satisfaction. The maintenance work, despite its humble nature, had connected him to concrete accomplishment in ways his executive role never had. December arrived with swirling snow and holiday decorations throughout the city. The approaching Christmas season brought complicated emotions for all of us. Memories of last year's disastrous dinner hovering like ghosts at the edges of conversation. The children grew quieter, more withdrawn, clearly remembering the incident that had set these life-altering events in motion. "Should we talk about it?" I asked Emma one evening, finding her staring out the window at holiday lights twinkling across neighboring buildings. "About what happened last Christmas." She didn't pretend to misunderstand, her young face solemn in the reflected glow. "Dad pushed you down," she stated plainly. "He was mean to you so Mr. Bennett could sit in your chair. I had nightmares about it for weeks." "That moment changed many things," I acknowledged, "but perhaps not all for the worse in the long view." Emma considered this, her expression thoughtful beyond her years. "You mean Dad becoming better? Or us living with you? Or the foundation thing?" "All of those," I confirmed. "Sometimes painful events force growth that wouldn't happen otherwise." We decided to approach Christmas differently this year, volunteering at a community dinner on Christmas Eve, followed by a quiet celebration at home on Christmas Day. Rebecca would have the children for part of the holiday, an arrangement that felt appropriate as we all adjusted to new patterns of family connection. The prison allowed extended phone calls during holiday weeks, giving Nathan more time to speak with each of us individually. His call on Christmas Eve came after we returned from volunteer work at a local shelter, the children tired but fulfilled from serving meals to less fortunate families. Nathan listened attentively as they described their experience, asking thoughtful questions that demonstrated genuine interest rather than perfunctory attention. When they handed the phone to me for a private conversation, his voice carried emotion he couldn't fully contain. "They sound good, Mom. More settled. Less angry." "Time helps," I replied, moving to my bedroom for privacy. "And purpose. The volunteer work was their idea. They wanted to do something meaningful instead of just receiving gifts." "That's your influence," Nathan observed. "You've always understood that giving creates more satisfaction than getting." We spoke for several minutes about practical matters, the children's school progress, upcoming medical appointments, plans for their next visit. As our time neared its end, Nathan shifted to a more difficult subject. "I've been thinking about Dad a lot lately," he said, his voice quieter. "About how disappointed he would have been in what I did, in who I became." The mention of Robert created a familiar ache beneath my ribs. "Your father always believed in redemption," I told him, "in the capacity for change. He struggled with how to help you develop character, worried we were making things too easy, but he never stopped believing you could become the man he knew you could be." "I wish I could talk to him," Nathan admitted. "Tell him I finally understand what he was trying to teach me all those years, that I'm trying to become someone he wouldn't be ashamed of. He knows," I said, surprising myself with the certainty I felt. "Wherever he is, he knows." After the call ended, I retrieved Robert's journal from my bedside drawer, turning to entries I hadn't read during my earlier exploration. Beyond the frustrations and concerns about Nathan's character development, I found passages of profound hope of faith in our son's potential, despite evidence to the contrary. February 12, 2005, Nathan showed a different side today. Found him helping Mrs. Chambers with her groceries, the elderly neighbor no one pays attention to. Did it spontaneously without expectation of reward or recognition. That's the young man I've always believed exists beneath the entitlement and self-absorption. The question remains, how do we nurture that authentic self instead of the false persona he presents to the world? The entry provided unexpected comfort confirmation that Robert had seen in Nathan the capacity for genuine compassion that was emerging now through painful circumstances. Perhaps the seeds of transformation had always been present, requiring only the right conditions, however harsh, to finally take root and grow. Christmas Day arrived with gentle snowfall that blanketed the city in pristine white. The children opened modest gifts in the morning before Rebecca arrived to take them for the afternoon. In their absence, I found myself drawn to the terrace garden, now dormant under winter's grip. The carefully tended plants had retreated beneath the soil, their visible beauty temporarily surrendered, but their essential nature intact, waiting for conditions that would allow renewed growth. The metaphor seemed particularly apt as I reflected on our family's journey through this challenging year. The external trappings of our previous life had been stripped away: Nathan's corporate position, the luxury home, the social status, the illusion of perfect family harmony. What remained was more authentic, more honest, more resilient in its hard-won growth, not despite the harsh conditions, but because of them. When the children returned that evening, they brought unexpected news. Rebecca had informed them she was moving to Arizona next month to live near her parents, accepting a position with a regional bank that offered a fresh start away from the lingering shadows of scandal. She wanted the children to consider spending summers with her once settled. "What do you think about that?" I asked, carefully watching their expressions for signs of distress. Tyler shrugged with practiced teenage nonchalance that didn't quite mask his underlying feelings. "It's fine. Better than pretending nothing happened, I guess." Emma's response carried more visible emotion. "I want to stay here with you," she insisted, momentary panic flashing across her features. "I don't want to move again." "No one's asking you to move," I assured her quickly. "This remains your home for as long as you need it to be. Your mother is simply suggesting summer visits once she's established there." Relief softened Emma's expression as she processed this clarification. "Oh, that might be okay then." January brought another development in our evolving family situation. Nathan qualified for a prison education program, allowing him to earn certification in building maintenance systems while serving his sentence. His letter describing the opportunity radiated genuine enthusiasm, not for reduced time or special privileges, but for structured learning that built upon skills Jorge had introduced. "The program instructor reminds me of Jorge," he wrote. "Same no-nonsense approach, same insistence on doing things right rather than quickly. We're starting with HVAC systems next week, complicated stuff, but fascinating when you understand how all the components work together. It's strange to be excited about something so practical after years of chasing abstract financial goals, but this knowledge feels useful in a way that quarterly projections never did." I shared portions of the letter with Jorge during our monthly foundation meeting. The older man nodded with quiet satisfaction, his weather-worn face creasing into a smile. "He's finding his way," Jorge observed, "learning to value what he creates rather than what he acquires. That's real growth." February marked the first anniversary of Nathan's guilty plea. The milestone prompted reflection on the extraordinary changes a single year had brought: Nathan's incarceration, an apparent transformation, the children's adjustment to living with me, Rebecca's relocation, the foundation's successful launch. The company had not merely survived the crisis, but emerged stronger, our partnership with Bennett Industries creating synergies that benefited both organizations. During our monthly visit to the prison, I noticed subtle changes in Nathan's appearance and demeanor. The initial shock of incarceration had faded, replaced by a measured composure that suggested internal resources rather than resignation. He spoke about his education program with genuine passion, describing technical systems with the enthusiasm he had once reserved for investment opportunities. When a guard interrupted to announce visiting hours were ending, Nathan accepted the limitation with grace that would have been unimaginable in his previous life. As we prepared to leave, Nathan asked if he might have a moment alone with me. The children waited by the door with a supervising officer, while Nathan leaned forward, his voice low but clear. "I've been thinking about what happens after I'm released." He began, meeting my gaze directly. "I won't ask for anything from Jackson Development. That chapter of my life is closed, and rightfully so. But I'd like to work with the foundation program if you and William would consider it. Not in management, not making decisions, just contributing what I'm learning about maintenance systems, about starting over when you've lost everything." The request carried no sense of entitlement, no assumption of privilege based on family connection. It was presented as a genuine desire to contribute meaningfully to a program whose mission he understood from personal experience. "That's more than 3 years away," I reminded him. "Many things could change in that time." "I understand," he acknowledged. "I just wanted you to know that's where my thoughts are heading, toward rebuilding something worthwhile, not reclaiming what I lost through my own actions." On the drive home, Tyler broke our reflective silence with an observation that caught me by surprise. "Dad seems more like Grandpa Robert now," he said, gazing out at the passing landscape. "Not like before." "How so?" I asked, curious about the comparison my grandson had drawn between his father and the grandfather he barely remembered. In those old videos you showed us, Tyler explained. Grandpa Robert was always focused on what he was doing, not on how he looked doing it. Dad used to be all about appearances. Now he seems more interested in actual things like Grandpa was. The insight struck me with unexpected force, Nathan indeed exhibiting qualities that echoed Robert's authentic engagement with the world. My late husband had approached everything from architectural drawings to weekend woodworking with the same devoted attention, finding satisfaction in the work itself, rather than external validation. March brought Emma's school play, a modern adaptation of A Christmas Carol, performed in springtime due to winter scheduling conflicts. She had secured the role of the narrator, a significant speaking part that both excited and terrified her. For weeks, she practiced lines in front of my bedroom mirror, gaining confidence with each rehearsal. On opening night, Tyler, Rebecca, visiting from Arizona, and I sat in the school auditorium watching Emma transform from nervous teenager to poised performer. Her clear voice carried Dickens' timeless message of redemption across the crowded room. I am not the man I was. I will not be the man I must have been, but for this intercourse. The line resonated beyond its theatrical context, echoing conversations about Nathan, about change, about the possibility of becoming someone different than circumstance or habit might have dictated. After the performance, as we presented Emma with congratulatory flowers, Rebecca pulled me aside for a private word. "Thank you," she said simply, her expression carrying complicated emotions. "For being what they needed when neither Nathan nor I could be." The acknowledgement surprised me, our relationship having been cordial but distant throughout the legal proceedings and aftermath. "They're remarkable children," I replied. "A credit to both their parents despite everything." Rebecca nodded, tears gathering but not falling. "I've been so focused on my own survival that I haven't properly expressed gratitude for what you've done. Taking them in, maintaining stability, allowing their relationship with Nathan to continue, despite every reason you had to discourage it." "That's true, Grace Evelyn." The conversation marked a subtle shift in our complex family dynamic, recognition that beyond legal proceedings and corporate betrayals existed human beings attempting to navigate impossible situations with whatever wisdom and strength they could muster. No villains or heroes, just flawed individuals facing consequences, making amends, rebuilding from ruins. As spring returned to Chicago, the terrace garden once again burst into vibrant life. Tyler had taken increasing responsibility for its care, revealing an unexpected talent for nurturing growing things. Under his attentive hands, vegetables now grew alongside ornamental plants, practical sustenance integrated with aesthetic beauty. One evening, as we harvested the first spring lettuces for dinner, Tyler gestured toward the thriving plants with quiet pride. "These seeds looked dead when we planted them," he observed. "Just dry little specks. But they had everything they needed inside them, waiting for the right conditions." The simple observation carried profound wisdom. Perhaps Nathan, too, had contained dormant possibilities all along, qualities of character and purpose that required specific conditions to emerge. Perhaps the privilege and ease that Robert and I had provided despite our best intentions had actually prevented rather than nurtured his authentic growth. Emma joined us on the terrace carrying the wooden jewelry box Nathan had made. "I want to take this to Dad next time we visit," she announced. "Show him I'm really using it. Jorge said sometimes he wasn't sure it was good enough to give me, but I think it's perfect." Her words encapsulated our family's gradual healing recognition of imperfection, not as failure, but as evidence of authentic effort, of genuine care expressed through imperfect means. The box's value lay not in flawless execution, but in the meaning embedded within its uneven joints and slightly misaligned lid. That evening, as the children slept and the city lights twinkled beyond my windows, I found myself contemplating the extraordinary journey we had undertaken since that fateful Christmas dinner. The family we had been was indeed gone forever, the comfortable patterns and assumptions shattered beyond repair. But in their place, something new was gradually emerging: more authentic relationships, more honest communication, more genuine appreciation for qualities that truly mattered. Not a return to what was, but perhaps the beginning of something better. Not an ending, but a transformation. A family rebuilt on foundations of earned respect rather than obligatory bonds or financial dependency. A slow, imperfect healing that carried the visible marks of where we had been broken but grew stronger precisely at those mended places.